I was in the market for a new controller and I spent quite a bit of time looking at various models and wound up settling on the Presonus Atom. And in this video, we're going to unbox the Atom and take a very brief look at its build quality and features. It just arrived today, so after I've had a few days to get acquainted with it, I'll put up a more in-depth tutorial detailing all of the features and how to set it up as you'd like within Studio One. And at some point, I'll probably do another video detailing how you can set it up in other DAWs as well. Now, that being said, my biggest requirements in a controller that I had in mind while I was looking was that it had to be portable, a quality build, and I wanted the integration to be tight with Studio One, and this appeared to meet all three. So let's go ahead and pop open the box and see what we've got. And here we have a standard USB cable with Type A and B connectors, a health, safety, and compliance guide, and a registration and quick start guide. So now let's get to the fun stuff and take a look at the device itself. Now my first reaction is that this has a bit more weight to it than I had expected, and I don't mean heavy, but it doesn't feel like an empty plastic housing, like just a plastic case with nothing inside of it, if you know what I mean. So I like the feel of it. And it is made of plastic, but at the same time, it doesn't feel cheap. The buttons, pads, and pots feel good. The pads are actually very stiff, which may be a good or a bad thing, depending on what you prefer. They seem almost nearly unmovable. I've used Nectar and Akai controllers, and those definitely had more movement than the Atom, but we'll just have to wait and see how this translates while actually using it. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and get this connected and take a brief look at some of the controls and what it looks like while powered on and while using it with Studio One. There aren't any drivers that are required for the device since it is manufactured by Presonus. It's simply plug and play and will work immediately with Studio One, at least with the pre-mapped setup. So I've just connected the supplied USB cable to the back of the Atom and then to my laptop. Okay, so the Atom is now powered up. We've connected it with the USB cable to the laptop, and we can see all of the pads are illuminated at this point. Let's go ahead and launch Studio One and see how this is going to take over control of the Atom. Now, while the software was loading, the Presonus logo was green. Now, once Studio One has launched, it's turned blue, and we can see that the pads in the center are no longer illuminated. And what I'm going to do right now is actually, if I Control, comma, and come to the external devices, we can see that without installing any additional software, the Atom is recognized and ready to go within Studio One. So I'm going to cancel out here and then come to Create a New Song. And I'm going to change the location to my desktop. Let's select that folder, click OK. And then we have a message here. I've been having all sorts of issues with sample rates and recording this tutorial, to be honest with you, after a Windows update. So I'm getting a warning here that the sample rates are not a match. So I'm going to come to Song Setup, and let's change that to 48 kilohertz. I'll apply, choose OK. Hopefully everything will be all right. Let me come back here really quickly and check the audio interface, our control panel. Okay. So now that Studio One is launched, all of the pads are again illuminated and the center pads are actually blue. And let's just go ahead and bring in the impact, because this is going to be one of the instruments that a lot of us are going to be working with the Atom. Once that loads, the pads turns white. I'm not sure if you can tell that in the camera, but they do change. I'll close out the browser. And if we come to the top and choose a preset, I'll go with the atmospheric tech. Then we can see the pads then change again to reflect the color of the pads within impact. So this percussion 4 is blue, and if I trigger here with an impact using the mouse, we can see that it illuminates on the Atom. So the MIDI control is actually bi-directional, so whatever we do within Studio One is going to be reflected here, particularly with the pads. And of course, the whole reason why we would get the Atom is to trigger from it. And we can see that that's working immediately. Okay, and so we're just going to move right along and quickly cover just a few things here. And then after I've had some time to spend with this, I'm going to put up an in-depth tutorial. But in the upper left-hand corner here, we have a song section here with a setup and set loop. We can actually set the loop for our MIDI events and audio events by using the Atom. Below that, we have event and we have an editor button. So I'm actually going to use the show hide in the instrument section here to close out the impact, and this is going to be invaluable for me to be able to show and hide VST instruments just simply by using the button on the Atom versus grabbing the mouse. So I'm going to just expand this out a bit and double click to add a MIDI part. And then if I come back up to the event section, here we have the editor. If I press that, we can see that we immediately access the editor for manipulating MIDI data for the impact. I'm going to go ahead and select that and close it back out to come back to our drum sounds. I'll close out edit within Studio One. Now within the instrument section here, we saw the show hide. We have a preset. So I'll use the show hide to bring up the impact again. If I hold down the preset button and choose the up down, I'll choose down. We can see that we change the preset. Our pad colors do change to reflect the updated preset. I'll hold the preset again and choose up to come back to our atmospheric tech. Now below that we have a bank button for choosing our banks. By default, we're going to be on bank 1, and that corresponds to bank A, rather. Now, you can tell that you have sounds on your banks if you have this vertical line here. So if I trigger our drum sounds, you can see activity here. And we have this same vertical line on B. So if I hold bank and press pad 2, we then change to bank 2. We can see that's updated here. And the color of our pads has changed. And I can press and hold to trigger the loops that are contained within this bank B. And if I'd like to go back to bank A, I would simply hold bank and press pad 1. Okay, now below that we have mode and we have a full level button. If we activate that, the MIDI is going to be sent out at full level. We then have note repeat. So if we come to this hat here, so whatever pad you press last is going to be the one that's affected by the note repeat. So while I have that hat selected, I'll press note repeat. Our pad colors change and the bottom 8 are going to turn yellow. And if I press and hold, we have quarter note triplets, eighth note triplets, 16th, and so on. Below that, we have straight quarter notes, 8th, 16th, and 32nd. If we'd like to leave that note repeat setting, we can just press the note repeat button, and we're back to our drum sounds. Now at the very bottom we have a shift button, and this is going to allow us access to additional controls on these buttons that are not immediately available. The pads also do contain settings as well, and we'll go into depth in that in the in-depth tutorial. To the right, we've already taken a brief look at the up and down buttons here. To access presets, we can choose samples. We have left, right, select, and zoom. And then at the very bottom right hand side, we have transport controls. So I can actually activate the click control by pressing this top button. I'm going to use the show hide to close out our impact. Now here is our click track activation. If I use the transport control, we can see that the click illuminates here. If I turn that off, and so we can use this button as well to turn our click track on. Now I can press play by using that there, and we can hear our click track. I can stop using the bottom button. I can enter into record by using this here. Pressing it again, we exit record. If I stop, then we stop. If I press stop again, we return to the area where we re-entered into record. If I press stop again, we return to the beginning of our track. All right, so that's a brief overview of all of the buttons and pads. Up above, we do have some pots. So if I go ahead and show the impact again, these are pre-mapped to certain parameters, although we can change them to be whatever we'd like. But just so you know, by default, this first one here is going to adjust our amplitude. So you can see here that that is changing as I adjust the knob. The second one is going to adjust our panning here. All right, now the third one is going to adjust our transpose within the pitch area. And the last knob here is going to adjust the decay down below in our amp section. And again, these are just the pre-map settings. We can change these to be whatever we'd like within any DAW. They are CC information. Or they send out CC information. Okay, and just to wrap up, I'm gonna go ahead and close out the impact. Let's come to the browse, and we can do all of the browsing from the Atom. I just haven't delved into the manual just yet to discover all of that. But if I click, hold, and drag the MiTi in, notice the pads are going to change. The yellow keys are going to represent our white keys. The blue are going to represent the black keys. So just notice that that's going to give you a visual aid when you're working with a synthesizer versus a drum machine. And the knobs are also going to be pre-mapped. So with the synth here, in particular MiTi, the first one is going to control our cutoff filter there. The second one will control our resonance here. The third will control cell 1 amount, which I have no idea what that is, but we can look in our parameter automation window and see that that's what that's changing. Now the fourth and final button is going to control our master volume. And again, we can always set these up to control whatever parameter we'd like, and I'll cover that in detail in the in-depth tutorial.